Hi, I'm Cain, and you're watching Cain Course World History. If you've been following along over the last couple of videos, we've had a number of different topics, including the end of the Roman Empire, as well as the foundations of the Byzantine Empire, and through it all we see the growth of Christianity. And Christianity certainly became one of the world's most popular religions during this time. But it's around the same time that a new religion will emerge as well, one that has many similar shared characteristics with Christianity, but in itself is something completely different. That religion is Islam, and Christianity and Islam will be forever linked throughout all of history. Let's go. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam have always been linked together because all three of them are monotheistic religions, or they believe in one God. And their origins are also directly tied together. We've already discussed how Christianity and Judaism go hand in hand through most of history. And obviously they begin to diverge after the death of Christ. But Islam actually has a similar relationship as well, because it starts with the people who will popularize Islam, the Arab people. According to the Old Testament, Abraham, before he had Isaac, had another son. His name was Ishmael. It wasn't a son with his wife Sarah, it was a son with his slave Hagar. Now, Ishmael was not connected to the promise that God had given Abraham in that covenant, so he actually kind of went his separate way. And if you track genealogies, it becomes clear that the people of the Arabian Peninsula are the descendants of Ishmael, and it's here that Islam will begin. But before we talk about the details of Islam, we should have a better understanding of what the Arabian Peninsula actually is in our geographic setting overall. Located near the Mediterranean Sea, Red Sea, Egypt, and Persia, the Arabian Peninsula was a perfect location for trade and crossroads between some of the major empires in early world history. But the Arabian Peninsula itself was mostly desert, and the good, lush land that was needed for farming just wasn't there. So most of the people there, who were called the Bedouins, ended up being nomadic herders. There's that word again, nomadic herders. And once again, this would be another group of people who was so vital to cultural transfer in early world history. But early on, the Bedouins were very tribal and very nomadic because they were constantly searching for oases, or areas that had water. And over time, because of their reliance on both trade and herding, they did set up several important cities that were locations for both trade and crossroads, Mecca being the chief of them. Located on the Red Sea, Mecca was a crossroads for two major trading routes, one that stretched up towards Jerusalem and Syria, and another that went into modern-day Iran, or Persia at the time. So because of that, Mecca became very rich, but it was also a religious center. Many of the Arab people, who earlier in their history had been called the Ishmaelites, believed that there was a religious shrine in Mecca that had been constructed by Abraham himself. The large box-like shrine quickly became a catch-all for any type of religion, and it housed statues of different gods and goddesses from a variety of different religions. It's a reflection of the crossroads and growing diversity within Mecca. And the Kaaba itself is kind of like when a parent gets frustrated with their kids who left all their toys out. They get a toy box and they have the kid clean it up. Timmy, if I see another idol laying around, it's time out. Naturally, Mecca did not have a unified religious identity, and this frustrated certain people. Most notably, Muhammad. Muhammad had lived in Mecca all his life, and he started his life as a simple shepherd. And later on, he married rich and got into a wealthy caravan company, and as a merchant, he became pretty wealthy himself. But Muhammad was very concerned about the amount of idols and what was going on within Mecca religiously. So he decided to do something about it. He decided to make up his own religion. Muhammad believed that all of the idol worship had created a very immoral and sinful society, so he went and meditated in a cave. Muhammad then claimed that he was visited by the angel Gabriel, a representative of the only God, in Arabic called Allah. Muhammad and his wife quickly submitted to this God, which is where the term Islam itself comes from, which means to submit. Whether or not it actually happened, Muhammad believed that he was directly called by Allah to change the religious practice of Mecca. And so that's exactly what he tried to do. He brought this new teaching and this new word from God, which called everyone to destroy their idols, to Mecca, and was met with threats of death and murder, which caused him to flee. Now, there's two reasons why the people of Mecca probably didn't believe Muhammad. The first would be that they thought he was crazy. Not only was he illiterate, he was just a merchant. It would be unfathomable for a God to appear to him. So people discounted him. On top of that, people don't like change. They've been deeply rooted in their old ways of polytheism. Why change to something so radically different, and why just because some shepherd or merchant tells you to? This is why Muhammad was met with death threats. In what was known as his hijra, Muhammad ended up fleeing north to the city of Medina, where he was actually accepted, and much of the city quickly responded well to his new theology and became Muslim. It's here that Muhammad wrote the sacred text of Islam, a book called the Quran, which detailed all of his experiences and conversations with Gabriel and Allah. It's here that the overall faith of Islam was actually created, but Muhammad didn't want to stay in Medina. In fact, he believed that he had a duty, a submission to Allah, to bring back this new theology to the people of Mecca. And since they reacted so poorly, well, bad things were coming. 8 years later, Muhammad returned to Mecca, this time with an army, and he destroyed all of the idols in the Kaaba and killed anyone who continued to worship them. The conquest of Mecca shows two things. The first being that Islam does not take a peaceful route when it spreads. It is normally spread through conquest and warfare. And Mecca quickly becomes the holiest shrine of all of Islam, specifically with the Kaaba itself. It's a theme we'll see again and again in the history of Islam, that normally when another nation or another religion is conquered, some sort of religious shrine of the Muslim nature is built to commemorate that. But the conquest of Mecca also shows that Muhammad is not just a prophet. He's not just a religious leader. He is a political leader as well, a militaristic leader who believed in spreading Islam through this process of conquest. And at this point, it might be important for us to stop and talk about what this faith actually believes. Islam is monotheistic, believing in only one God, in this case, Allah. While there are similarities, Allah is a completely different God from that in Christianity or Judaism. Some of the origins may be the same, but it is a different deity entirely. Muslims believe that Allah is all-powerful and compassionate, at the same time should be feared, and that it is the duty of every single person to submit to Allah. And according to the Muslim faith, salvation comes based on one's actions. If you live a life of service to Allah, you will be saved. If not, you're condemned to a life of pain and torture. Now, the path to service of Allah in Islam is outlined very clearly through 5 pillars. These are the core tenets of Islam. The first is the Shahada, a clear declaration of faith and dedication to Allah that goes like this: there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. Muslims are also supposed to pray 5 times a day, directly facing towards Mecca, the site of the birth of this religion. Islam also encourages its followers to frequently give to the poor and charity. Fasting, specifically during the Muslim month of Ramadan, is also required to show dedication to Allah. And finally, if possible, all Muslims are encouraged to visit Mecca on a pilgrimage called a Hajj at least once in their lifetime. All of this can be summarized within the belief of a submission and a complete following of Allah. Now, there's often a 6th pillar that's often left out called jihad, which refers to this submission to God. It's not the holy war that a lot of people believe it is, but oftentimes it does result in service through the military. Supposedly, the Quran contains the inspired word of Allah that was revealed to Muhammad. And in fact, Muslims believe that the Bible is actually the beginning of this, and that the Quran continues it and purifies it. They believe that the Bible is a semi-revelation of God and that the Quran completes all of that. So speaking of which, how do Islam and Christianity really differ? Both these religions have a similar origin, going back to the Bible, and both are monotheistic. But the God that's believed in Christianity is a triune God with the importance of Jesus Christ, as we have expanded on in the past. Islam doesn't have any of that. It only has the belief in Allah, which is a very different deity from that of Christianity. Christianity also holds that the Bible is 100% correct. It's not just a history book. And with that, it's the inspired word of God. It is complete. There doesn't need to be anything added to it. Rather, Islam says that, yes, something needed to be added. It's the Quran, and it is the truth. But truly, it is at the core of the salvation discussion of where these two religions differ. Christianity holds that we are saved by grace through faith in Jesus Christ because of his death and resurrection. Islam leaves that out entirely. It says that the only way you're saved is whether or not you live a life that is good in the eyes of Allah. And in the end, he decides whether or not you are saved or condemned. That's so different from Christianity, in which salvation is truly a gift for those who believe because of the sacrifice that God gave through his son, Jesus. So while there are similarities, these religions are very different, and it's for that reason that these religions are so linked throughout history. Again and again, they're going to come up in connection and conflict. But in the meantime, let's focus on the growth and spread of Islam. Muhammad was very intent on expanding Islam. In the conquest of Mecca, he began to expand even further throughout the Middle East. Then, as a new area would be conquered under Islam, a mosque or a Muslim house of worship would be built. Muhammad, however, died in 632. And after his death, the new Muslim kingdom that was growing, or as it was known as the Caliphate, had a decision to make about who should take over. Very quickly, there was a split amongst the Muslim peoples. You see, some people believe that Muhammad's successor should be directly related to him, a direct descendant of him. This group of people became known as the Shiite people. Be careful how you say that one. On the other side, the Sunni people believed that anyone could be the successor. It could be somebody who had been trained within the Muslim faith. But they also believed that this leader should not just be a religious leader, but also a military and political leader. In the end, the Sunnis went out and they selected the first caliph, or political and religious leader of this new growing Muslim caliphate. His name was Abu Bakr. Yeah, one of the best names in world history. Under his leadership and the leadership of the next three caliphs, who together are known as the four rightly guided caliphs, the Muslim empire began to dramatically expand. They conquered places like Jerusalem, Syria, Egypt, other chunks of North Africa. They even made their way into southern Spain in 711. Muslim people had a very effective military, though. It was very mobile and cavalry-based, using horses and camels, just as the Bedouins had in the past. And now their conquest of southern Spain left them on the doorstep of Europe. But then in 732, Muslim armies collided in southern France with the Frankish armies under the leadership of Charles Martel and lost the Battle of Tours, which caused the Muslim expansion to stop. We'll cover the Christian response to this event in the future, but for now, this meant that Dar al-Islam, or the Muslim empire, was still entirely large, but it was stopped in southern Spain. Spain would actually remain under Muslim control for several centuries, and you can still find remnants of Islamic civilization in Spain today, including this architecture in the Mosque of Cordoba. Now, in the midst of all of this, they were conquering different people of different religions. For the most part, again, Islam wanted to convert these people, but they weren't tolerant of other religions, often encouraging these people or forcing these people to pay a special tax to allow them to practice their religion. It can't be denied that Islam continues to spread. In the Middle East, Africa, and even parts of Europe were becoming Muslim, and the influence of Dar al-Islam was unparalleled. In the midst of this, there starts to be some fragmentation, specifically between the Sunnis and the Shias. An example of this happens in about 661, when a debate over who the next caliph should be results in the assassination of Muhammad's descendant, Ali. These divisions showed that Dar al-Islam would never truly be united, and while there were attempts at it, it was beginning to crumble into more regional-based Muslim empires. In the 700s, Dar al-Islam reached its height under the Umayyad Caliphate. The Umayyads were the ones who lost the Battle of Tours, and they had a very militaristic edge that allowed Dar al-Islam to truly expand. The Sunni-Shia split, along with the Umayyads' great focus on military above everything else, caused discontent within the caliphate, which is why many began to rally behind the leadership of Abu al-Abbas, a general who had conquered Damascus in about 750. He also invited the leadership of the Umayyads over for dinner and poisoned all of them, which allowed him to take control of the caliphate and initiate the start of a new dynasty, the Abbasid Caliphate. The Abbasids are known for being the golden age of Islam. They weren't as militaristically focused, but under them, the arts began to flourish, and so did the economy. The Abbasid capital of Baghdad quickly surpassed Constantinople as the wealthiest city in all of the world, as well as a true center for education and the arts. Under the leadership of Harun al-Rashid, Baghdad really emerged in the realm of education, pioneering new advances in math, poetry, and even science and medicine. Yet the growing size and diversity within the caliphate showed that these rulers began to have their power fragmented. And while the Abbasids began to fragment, smaller regional Muslim kingdoms began to emerge. One example would be in Spain, where a kingdom called El-Andalus continued to rule Spain. Or around 850, when a nomadic group of horse people called the Seljuk Turks converted to Islam and began to wreak havoc on the Middle East. That's right, another group of nomadic horse people, and you better bet they're going to be important. While Dar al-Islam was not unified like it once was, its overall influence in world history can't be ignored. See, Islam has now become the fastest growing religion, one of the most popular in the world. And through it all, it continues to spread through militaristic conquest. Not only are its people so committed and so submitted to Allah that they will pretty much do anything for it, there is a precedent for violence and expansion. And again, as we mentioned earlier, because of the similarities it has with Christianity, but more importantly, the stark differences it has, these two religions will be linked at the hip for so much of world history. We saw what happened once when they clashed at the Battle of Tours. The Franks, and therefore Christian Europe, was able to win out. But what will happen if these two very different religions collide again? What will happen when these worldviews meet? Whatever the outcome is, I think we can all agree that the events are going to change the world. But that's a story for another day. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.